All right, guys, we're talking ring muscle ups today, and some of the basics. First things we want to focus on are grip, how we're holding the rings. If this is your first muscle up, this is probably not the best video for you. This is what we're going to try and do to string muscle ups together and become generally efficient at them. So your first muscle up, you should be in like a true false grip, but if you're trying to string them together and you can do one most of the time, then we want to get into this like hybrid grip, okay? So if the rings are here, right, we're not all the way over, the rings are sitting through the palm, and we're kind of like this. We're not all the way over into the wrist region, okay? So we're kind of through here, pinkies down on top of it. One of the biggest things we want to focus on for the ring muscle up is where our feet relation is to our hip in relationship to our shoulder, all right? And with that, we want to make sure that throughout this whole thing that our hips are never above our shoulders. We talk about elevating and getting this like parallel float, which is really good. But what happens is people just end up pulling and then they're almost inverted. If you've ever done a GHD sit-up, it's pretty hard from a flat position. It would be even harder if our feet were above us, right? So we never want our feet to be above our hips, to be above our shoulders. So as we're coming through, we arch, we come through. We want to think of popping the hips as soon as we break that perpendicular line, as soon as we're swinging through and we're in this position here, our feet are going to be in front. We want to think of popping our hips here, leading up with the hips above the knees, but they're still not above our shoulders. So we're not actually leaned back. We are in this sort of slightly downhill slope. Again, if you're just learning how to swing on the rings, it's very good to learn how to get parallel and then elevate together feet, hips, or feet, knees, hips, and shoulders. But once we're trying to get very proficient, if we watch, our feet have to stay, we don't want them to get too high because then we're late behind the bar or we're late behind the ring. So even if our hips get all the way up to the rings, if our shoulders are down here when we go to turn over, we're never going to make it because then we're going to start falling down before we turn over. So as we come up, we want to think of getting the hips close to the rings, but making sure our shoulders, as we elevate, are above our hips, because then we're just going to fall over the rings instead of being inverted and having our hips all the way up, but our shoulders down, okay? So we're going to talk about some swings first, basics. We have small swings. So we're going to go to big swings. Right? So again, you can see my feet are slightly elevating above my hips. When we go for our actual pull, we want to make sure that our hips stay above our knees and feet the whole time. If we start to pike too much, then we're going to be in this inverted position, this U, and that's not ideal to get over the rings. Okay. All right, so then we're going to talk about hip to ring, and we're going to show you kind of what that looks like. Again, it's not overly necessary to get all the way up to the rings if you're sacrificing your shoulder position relative to your hip. Very important. So bigger swings, getting flat. And we're going to talk about pulling the rings down to our hips. When we're doing that, again, making sure we're not getting inverted. Staying flat, making sure my shoulders are the highest point, all right? So we're gonna talk about, we're just gonna go into some muscle ups, stringing them together, making sure we're staying in that positive relationship. I'm waiting, I'm allowing my feet to get up. But again, if you see, my hips are never below my feet, and I'm never in an excessively piked position. My shoulders are always staying above my hips. My feet don't get very high, and neither do my hips compared to some other people, but that way I can keep a good relationship, and it's easy for me to just kind of fall over the rings that way instead of working very hard to get my hips very high, leaning my shoulders back further, creating more distance for that turnover. All right, guys, see you next time.